to the Growth Over Grades podcast, where we talk about education ideas and topics that matter most to our SpacesEDU educator community. I'm your host, Melody McAllister, educator advocate for SpacesEDU, your solution for digital documentation and assessment of student learning for all. Before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to Jordan and Colleen from my SpacesEDU team. They share a deep commitment to igniting change in education, and they introduced me to today's guest. In this episode, I will be talking with Thomas D'Amico, educator, leader, and director of education in Ottawa Catholic School Board. Tom, as he prefers to be called, has helped bring a deeper learning movement in his district. We are going to dive into what that means, what it looks like, and its impact on learning and teaching. Tom is a servant leader with a heart for his community. He is an edtech leader and always looking for ways to enhance education in a way that is safe and beneficial for learners. Tom, it's such an honor to have you on the Growth Over Grades podcast. Before we get started, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey in education?
Thanks, Melody, for the invitation. I'm really happy to speak with you and with your listeners today. I would say that my journey was not typical. Both of my parents were teachers, and as a teenager, I saw how hard they worked. I remember reflecting the last thing I wanted to do was become a teacher because they worked so hard every week and every weekend. My goal as a teenager, I think, was I wanted to play soccer, and that was my vision. I was going to be a pro soccer player. I went to school in Ontario, in Hamilton, Ontario, McMaster University, and I did a phys ed degree because that gave me a chance to focus on sports. I did play university level soccer. Unfortunately, in my last year, I wrecked my knee, so I needed a backup plan. And my backup plan still wasn't teaching. It was to go into management of professional soccer. So I did a master's of sport administration at University of Ottawa. And it did give me a chance to work with Ottawa's professional team, the Ottawa Intrepid, and I eventually became their general manager.
Oh, wow.
So that was the path I was going on, was professional sports. But unfortunately, the league had a shaky financial background, and I just got married. So I needed a backup plan, and my backup plan was became qualified as a teacher. And I ended up resigning as the general manager of Ottawa's pro soccer team, the Ottawa Intrepid, and I started teaching. When I started teaching, I was doing high school math, geography, adult education, computers, entrepreneurship, so a little bit of everything. From there, I became a vice principal and then a principal through many years. This is my 34th year with the school board. And eventually, I became a superintendent of learning technologies and then human resources, an associate director. And for the last 4 years, I've been a director of education. And I can honestly say, Melody, that I've loved every single job I've had in education. So it was never a matter of what's the next job. I always enjoyed what I was doing, and different doors opened for me. I know how privileged and fortunate I am to be in the position I am with the Ottawa Catholic School Board.
I love that. And I can definitely feel that joy coming through when you talk about your story. Were your parents really proud and happy when you went into education?
Well, they certainly let me do my own path. As I said, professional sports is where I thought I would end up. But I think they probably liked the job security where I ended up in education. And I did end up working for the same school board that both of them worked for. So I'm sure they were pleased with that. Yes.
That is really cool. So we're going to be talking about deeper learning today. And I think that probably there's a lot of educators listening that are putting different competencies into action that don't even know that it's under the umbrella of deeper learning. Do you mind sharing what deeper learning is and what it looks like?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the word deep learning refers as well to machine language learning. And with all the
Right.
focus on AI today, a lot of people will search for deep learning and they're going to find machine language or computer-based learning. And that's not at all what the deep learning framework is about. So deep learning, the term and the education, teaching, and learning framework came about 10 years ago. It was really influenced by the work of Dr. Michael Fullan. He and a couple of colleagues started NPDL, New Pedagogies for Deep Learning. And their goal was to focus on schools and districts looking at 4 elements and then the 6 C's, or the global competencies. And the 4 elements were leveraging technology, learning partnerships, learning environment, and new pedagogies, or we just call them pedagogies, but new pedagogies. So those are the 4 elements that they looked at. But the key was the 6 C's, or the global competencies. And the global competencies were character, they still are, character, citizenship, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. So that still doesn't explain to you what deep learning is, but that's the framework. So deep learning in its essence is learning that sticks with you for life. So if I'm a typical student, and I'll use high school as an example, I study for a test, I memorize a lot of facts, I hopefully do well on the test, and then I'm done with it, I forget it.
Right.
Deep learning, you're doing something for a passion, for a reason, and you're going to remember what you learned. So I have had, Melody, people say, well, it sounds a little bit like project-based learning. So I'll give a very quick example that I think will help listeners just situate what deep learning is. If I'm a traditional teacher and I'm doing a math unit, I want to teach kids about fractions, I may have a blackboard, or I may have a digital whiteboard, but I teach them the key concepts of fractions. And kids most likely are not engaged, and they will memorize how to do fractions, they move on. If I'm a project-based teacher, I'm going to take a unit, something like a birdhouse, and get kids, students to build a birdhouse, which they're excited about. They're making something that's meaningful. They may get it as a gift to someone, but I'm teaching them all about fractions and those measurements and the actual construction of the unit. What differs with deep learning is there's two more pieces I add to that project. One of them is I intentionally focus on the competency. So I may say to our students, you're going to be on teams, and I want to see how you improve on collaboration. And we do a pre-test and a post-test. So we look at how did they actually improve upon one of the C's or all of the C's. So that's one key area. The other area that you'll see in many deep learning activities is often there's an end goal of making something better. It could be your local school, your local community, it could be the world. So there's often a social justice aspect to the deep learning project. So if I stick with the birdhouses, we might have a learning partnership with someone who is a bird watcher in the community. It could be a wild bird sanctuary. They come in as guest speakers. They talk to the students about birds. And in the end, we may sell the birdhouses to our community, to our school, and we raise funds and we donate them back to that bird sanctuary. That's a big picture concept of deep learning. Those students that are involved in that type of activity, they're going to remember the activity, who they made a difference in the lives of other people, and at the same time, they learn fractions.
Yeah. Yes. um, when you're describing it, I wouldn't be able to find anything wrong about any of that. For me, it sounds like it's just a, like the best combination of social emotional learning, project-based learning, service learning, and competency-based learning, but actually under one framework instead of just focusing on these, individually. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I think that this kind of framework could help so many. So you said it's about 10 years old, or the movement is about 10 years old. What was the catalyst that caused you to begin a shift toward deeper learning in your district?
10 years ago, around 2013, we were doing a lot of innovative work in our district, lots of areas of technology. And at that time, our director, Julian Hanlon, and the associate director, Denise Andre, they traveled to the United States for a conference that Dr. Fullen was part of, and it was an introduction to deep learning. In Ottawa, in 2012, we had put together our leadership team. At the time, we thought it was very innovative. It was a vision paper called Towards 2020, Connecting with Our Students. So we were looking at how our students in 2012 were no longer engaged. They were playing the game of school, but they really were not enjoying school. Many of them, they were not engaged. They weren't necessarily happy with what they were doing. We were doing great things in our board with a digital ecosystem. We had added Wi-Fi to all of our schools. We were the first board in Ontario to add the Google suite of tools. We were introducing all kinds of tools. We were adding laptops. We added LCD projectors to every single classroom. We were creating digital professional learning communities. We were aligning our learning environments with those the digital pedagogies. At the time, we were calling it 21st century learning and teaching. That's what our goal was. But the real problem was there was no coherence. It was a whole ton of initiatives, and teachers and educators were saying, all right, what's next? Is this going to go away? This is something new. So what the deep learning framework did, and you brought that out in your introduction, was it added coherence to our district. It allowed us to move from a district that really was in somewhat with technology, there was some fear and caution. Everything was still locked down. We wanted to focus on curiosity, exploration, and innovation. And then when we had those elements and we had the 6 C's, it brought it all together. Everything that we were doing all of a sudden made sense. It was, yeah, this is what we're doing. Let's put a name to it and let's enhance it. and make sure that we have 85 schools in our board. We serve about 50,000 students. Let's make sure that all 85 schools eventually will be using the same terminology. So that was the spark, something we were already doing, but bringing coherence to it.
Right. And so my next question is, and before I even start that, I can, when you were talking about that in my mind, I'm thinking about all the technology you're bringing into the district. And in 2013, I'm sure some people were still using like the old fashioned projectors. So, like this has got to be for some teachers delightful and for others very scary. So, how did you get started getting everybody on board into this learning framework?
Yeah, very much was a change, and just like any change in this, there's some early adopters, there's late adopters, and there's that mass in the middle. So we were very strategic. We started it with 7 schools out of our 85, and each of those schools were connected with a technology lead because technology was so important early on in our initiative and our change movement. So they had a central staff member supporting their school. We wanted to make sure that they understood that if we changed teacher practice, it would increase student engagement, and that would lead to increased student achievement. So that was a real easy model for people to put their head around without all the terminology. We want to get kids more engaged so they'll have better achievement.
Yeah.
So we were very strategic in selecting those 7 schools. We have a group of superintendents and a group of trustees that have governance over our school board. We made sure we had one school selected for each superintendent and each of the trustees. So everyone was involved. It wouldn't be seen as this is a project for one person in the board. It was every superintendent, each of the trustees. We had a system-wide focus. We provided funding, and we really saw gains early on by re-envisioning our libraries. So when you look
Wow.
at your learning environment, we saw that as an easy first step for a win, because when you walked into our libraries, they were huge spaces. Very few students were visiting them. They were focused on being a repository for books. And we said, if we really want this to be about collaboration, communication, creativity, that's not what our libraries were about. Great people, great resources, but we need to change the culture. So we intentionally said to our teacher librarians, if you look at your data, and we did, we started by looking at the databases, about 1/3 of the books were never taken out. Like these were
Mhm.
atlases from 15, 20 years ago and things that were taking up space. There were 1/3 of the books that were used by specific teachers. So it could be subject oriented, a history that every year there's a unit that they will take certain books out. And then 1/3 were the high interest books. At the time, it was a lot of the vampire books, a lot of that genre that
Mhm.
students were really interested in. So we said to them, here's our vision. We want you to get rid of 1/3 of the books, the ones that your database says no one's looked at, and donate them wherever you can donate them. We want 1/3 to go back directly into the classrooms of the teachers that use them. And that's going to leave you with 1/3 of what you had and create huge open spaces. And we gave them a budget. They had to work with parents, with students, with teachers to get voice of what this should look like. We added an LCD projector, a smartboard in every library. We changed the name to Learning Commons. That was part of the changing the culture. They put in things like couches. They had on the LCD projector, it could be a fireplace image burning. And we had laptops that kids could sign out, iPads that they could sign out. And it was amazing. It was a really quick transformation. All of a sudden, everyone wanted to work in the Learning Commons. And Melody, what that did was in each school, when we converted those libraries to Learning Commons, classroom teachers started saying, I want that in my class. So instead of me having to take my class to that environment, how can I create that in my own classroom? So we did all 85 schools within 3 years. So within 3 years, we scaled from 7 schools to 15 to 85. We had so many intentional actions, like we rented yellow school buses and brought our principals to visit different schools so they could see how they were changing the learning environments, what type of flexible furniture they were ordering. At our central board office, our main hallways, we put all kinds of new types of flexible furniture because we pull out our principals and vice principals at the time for meetings to the board office so they could see what was available. And we started creating videos of our own staff. So 2 to 3 minute videos where they were focusing on deep learning or on the global competencies. And we would share that with all of our schools. Common 10 to 15 minute staff meetings where we created them centrally. We would send them out to all the schools. and it really took off. So that's how we scaled and how we made sure this was a district-wide a way of being with our learning framework and teaching framework. It wasn't an initiative that would be going away, and here we are 10 years later, and it still is the strength of our school board.
Right. Talk about early adopters. I mean, your district was. And it sounds like you were really focused on the whole person or whole child, just giving students and educators and leaders a place that they would actually want to be, where they would feel comfortable, where learning just felt natural. So I'm having a great time listening to you. This sounds amazing. I would love to see this with my own eyes, to be honest with you. So, what are some of the positive outcomes that you've seen in teaching and learning?
Well, when you say we'd love to see it with your own eyes, that's one of the positive outcomes we've seen is we've had all kinds of visitors from around the world that
Mm.
have come to visit us, and we learn from them. So it's we are always honest that we know we're on a journey of improvement, and you never reach that final journey. So we get feedback from visitors from other countries that say, "Have you thought about this?" or "Here's what I didn't see in your class." So that's a real positive. We also, we are a Catholic school board in Ontario. Publicly funded school boards include Catholic education. So we have four types of school boards that parents can choose from in Ottawa. We have
Oh,
the
wow.
Catholic School Board, which is open access, so anyone of any faith can attend. We have the Public School Board. Then we have the French Public School Board and the French Catholic Board. So in Ottawa Catholic, we have 50,000 students, and what we do is we focus on our Catholic social teachings and our social justice.
Wow.
So some of the other positive outcomes we've seen is that learning partnership. The learning partnership also involves school to school or class to class. So if you think back 10 years ago where classrooms were closed in
Mhm.
our district, many
Yeah.
teachers were they had a job to do, they closed the door, they did the job, and then they moved on to the next step. But when deep learning came in and one of the goals was learning partnerships, we also said to them, let's look at how the students are engaged when you partner with another class. So an example would be a grade 10 computer programming class or digital technology class that's doing programming. And we connected them with a grade 4, 5, or grade 3 class. And all of a sudden, those students in grade 10 were so excited to be doing programming because they may have been developing an app or a game for kids. They would go and meet with the kids, often over Google Meet. They would use those students to do the artwork. So the students in grade 3 or 4 or 5 would do the artwork. And then we ended up paying for buses to let them connect in person. And I'll tell you, Melody, students didn't miss that grade 10 class. In the past, where attendance might have been a question mark,
Right.
they were all there. They were so engaged because what they were doing was meaningful and purposeful. We do the same thing with our junior classes. So grade 6 students learning about climate change will work, they'll learn the key areas of the curriculum, but then they'll present it to the kindergarten class or grade 1 class. So that's part of their learning partnership. We certainly saw the advantage of leveraging technology, so we could embrace social entrepreneurship, where they could connect with businesses outside of the school, connect with different organizations. They could share what they were doing. The students were very proud of their work.
Yeah.
At the meantime, what about traditional? So that's what people will often ask me. What about standard EQAO? That's your standardized testing in Ontario. So we continue to perform above the province on every measure of standardized testing. So we still meet all those standards, but we know that we're going well beyond the basics.
Right.
And what we're doing is meeting the needs of every student and each of their passions. So that's our goal, and it's been really great to see. It's very difficult to say, did every change we make was a result of deep learning? Someone will say your scores in grade 6 reading went up. Was it because of deep learning? Well, in our board, deep learning is absolutely part of every single thing we do. So it's hard to say, was that because of a pedagogy that we were changing or using, or was because the learning environment now was more suited to kids that may have a learning disability or
Yeah.
maybe on the autism spectrum, and they can get up, they can walk around, they might have a bicycle in their classroom, that stationary bike that they're on. Others are on beanbag chairs. When we built our new schools, we design them with deep learning in mind. So the hallways have caves and areas for kids to work outside of the classroom. So I can't say for sure which part of deep learning is impactful on those standardized tests, but we know our scores have not gone down, which is positive, and we know our students are more engaged. And for our teachers that measure the competencies, which is voluntary right now, we know that they all see improvements in the students in any of the competencies when they intentionally teach it, measure it, and report it.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you don't just have the right equipment, you have the right culture. And what was that like changing? How did you see that shift over time?
Yeah, the culture is so important, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a culture so that all of our new leaders understand when they get into those positions of leadership, they're just going to continue with that deep learning. So it's not a matter of all of a sudden you have a new principal or a new vice principal, and deep learning is not on their radar. When we post our positions for deep learning, we would post that they have to show their portfolio of what they've done in deep learning in our district.
Wow.
When we bring new teachers into our district, we assume they have no background. They've never read any of Fullen's books or Joanne Quinn's books on deep learning. So we provide them each with one of the key books that we use as a resource for their teaching practice. We have what's called NTIP, New Teacher Induction Program, and part of their journey as a new teacher will be to continue to understand and learn about deep learning so they know what the philosophy is in our board. All of our senior staff continually be involved. And when we've seen things like deep learning all of a sudden starting to be associated with one person, we change the person. So if we have to change the lead, we will, not because they're not doing a good job, but because we want to make sure we're sharing those resources. So it's everything we do. If we're doing something on equity or we're doing
Hmm.
Indigenous education, those can't be one-offs. They can't be something different.
Right.
They have to fit into the deep learning framework. So if we bring in a new equity lead or a new mental health lead, we will send them on training in deep learning. And that's how we keep changing that culture.
Yeah, and I feel like everything that you're talking about is actually more equitable if we're thinking about all learners and inviting them and trying to get their special qualities and their unique abilities, that it is more equitable for them and it's a better place for them to learn in. Do you feel like over time when you've seen it before, deeper learning, and now with this framework and this culture building, do you feel like people or teachers want to stay, or people stay in your district a lot longer?
Yeah, we've never had a problem with turnover in our district. So that's not a concern right now. It wasn't before deep learning either. So we have a shortage of teachers for sure in Ontario and in Ottawa, but they're not leaving for other professions or other areas. So uh, they are staying. I can give you another example if you'd like of
Yeah.
the scale of where this has gone and why it's so exciting when we see a large scale, because it can be small, it can be one class, it can be a full year. So last year I was able to visit one of our elementary schools, St. George Elementary, and they were involved in an amazing deep learning activity. So they were one of their learning partnerships was with the Canadian Playful Schools Network. So that's sponsored by, or funded by Lego Foundation, and we had a partnership with the University of Ottawa. So that connected them with different schools across Canada right away. So there's just a good example of a learning partnership without even getting into any curriculum.
Mhm.
The grade 4 to 6 part of their curriculum is to look at ecosystems and water. So everyone in Ontario is learning that in grades 4 to 6. So they started by let's look at our learning partnerships. And we have a group, an organization in Ottawa called the Ottawa River Keeper. So they connected with the Ottawa River Keeper. So when the kids were learning, the students at that school, they were learning about water treatment and why it was important to endangered species from experts coming in. So the students then wanted to leverage technology. So another one of the elements, they used Minecraft and they
Mhm.
designed sustainable wastewater plants. These are kids in grades four,
Yeah.
5, and 6. They had created that. They then looked at that partnership. They went and met with the city of Ottawa with planning officials, and the planning officials gave them feedback on how they could improve their designs in
Wow.
Minecraft with wastewater. They then connected at the same time. There was a group of students at a nearby school, a high school. Our high schools go from grade 7 to 12. So Notre Dame High School, the grade 8 students were studying the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 14. So they were learning about life below water. The two schools connected because, again, looking for learning partnerships between grade levels,
Mm.
and they partnered. They created a virtual escape room to connect, to build relationships between the classes. At the same time, Notre Dame connected with the University of Ottawa, one of our universities here in the city, And university had a group of students that were doing a social enterprise called Project Nibby. And Project Nibby was students at the university were designing water filtration systems that they would fund to create, and they would go and install them in different communities around Canada. So you can see where all this is coming together.
Mm-hmm.
The students at Notre Dame decided we need to raise some money so we can buy one of these filtration. So they connected with soap makers in the community. They
Mm.
created 3D designed molds. They included marine animals in their molds for their soap that they connected with a biodegradable plastic company. They then connected with their grade 11 marketing class to say, how do we market this soap to raise money? St. George school students who had connected, you see these connections here, connected with the high school. They connected with Hopewell School in Labrador. And this was a school that was under a boil water advisory.
Oh, wow.
So they decided at St. George, we were doing all this work about water. Let's work with Notre Dame and Project Nibby, and let's raise enough money to buy a water filtration system that we can send to our friends in Labrador.
Labrador. Mm-hmm.
There were Inuit students at the school in Labrador, so they taught through Google Meet lots of Inuit games to the kids at St. George. So they developed friendships. These students then connected with Polyplastics in Ottawa, again, grades 4, 5, and 6. That was a company that would take recycled plastics and they would create products out of it. So the students in our elementary school created a company, a real company, not a pretend company, called Every Last Sip. And they partnered with Shopify, which is a company in Ottawa that creates online stores. They donated the store to the students. So they designed coasters and they sold them in the community. They worked with 5 other elementary schools to raise more money for Every Last Sip. And in the end, they raised enough money to donate 3 filtration systems from Project Nibby to the school and a daycare in Hopedale, Labrador. I think
Oh my gosh.
Hopedale. I happened to be at the school visiting the very last day when they had a Google Meet with the group in Labrador to talk about this is what we're donating. And when we were on that call, there was an order from the owner of Chapman Ice Cream in Ottawa. Sorry, in Canada. He's out east. He had heard about this project that the students were working in. He's in the Maritimes. And he had ordered $4,000 worth of coasters from our students for their stores so that they could add another filtration system in their fundraising. And then he said at the very end, and the kids jumped up the kids were so excited to hear for this guy saying he's donating $4,000 for a big order. And then at the end, he said, and I'm going to donate ice cream to your entire school for an ice cream party. So it's just an amazing example of deep learning in action. That learning will stick with those kids for the rest of their lives. And what impacted me was when I talked to some of the students, they said, the most important thing, again, keep going back to these are not university or grade 12 students, grade 4, 5, 6.
Right.
They said the best thing was that they were able to help their friends in Labrador to have safe, healthy drinking water. That was the best reward, even better than the year-end ice cream party.
Yeah.
So,
and
just amazing.
Better than any grade they could ever get on a report card. I mean, this.
Yeah, it's so much more important than grades.
Right. I mean, I got goosebumps. I got tears in my eyes. This is really cool. Is Every Last Sip still going on? Is that something that I could share with our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. I can send you a link afterwards. We have social entrepreneurship. That's an example of social entrepreneurship. So we use social entrepreneurship to connect any of our schools that want to take part with members of the community, to all business volunteers. So we probably have 25 to 30 stores, online stores with free stores donated by Shopify. And they're selling all kinds of products or services for all kinds of causes. And the causes are all selected by the class. So it's just like a Dragon's Den episode. The kids in any grade level, they'll have to, in groups, they'll have to pitch their ideas to decide what will be the charity of choice. And then they will decide. Last week, I visited a school that had one of their sales at Christmas. And they were selling Christmas decorations. They just ordered molds from Italy that had arrived, and they had made these Christmas decorations to sell. And their 2 charities were Make-A-Wish Foundation, and there was an Ocean Life donation as well that they were interested in. So all kinds of stores. It's perfect deep learning because they're learning to make a difference in someone else's life, and they're all very proud when they
Yeah.
do that.
I believe it. And now I see why like you are seriously busy because you are in these schools. When I look at your Twitter feed, you are with people. You're making these visits and you're talking with the people and the teachers in your community and the students. That's phenomenal. I am so excited. I wonder why are we not all doing this? This like
Well,
ah
it's now happening around 20 countries. So there's 20 countries, over 10,000 schools that are involved in the deep learning movement. And I can share with your listeners some exciting news. It used to be it was fee based. So when we started up until this year, we pay a fee every year for every school that's involved, a licensing fee. It's grown too big. Deep learning
mm,
for new pedagogy for deep learning had about 3 people running this for 20 countries. It's just not feasible. So all of their resources will now be free. There's no
wow.
longer any charge. Anyone that's interested in deep learning, they're just working on how to disseminate all of the learning. Like when we started 10 years ago, we didn't have slide decks. We had to create everything ourselves. But now there's resources to teach everyone the deep learning models, and there are some books available, but the books aren't free. But the
Yeah.
slide decks, and there's no longer a license fee to be part of new pedagogies for deep learning. So that's exciting for schools that across Canada and the United States that may have been interested but weren't in a position to pay an annual fee, so they
Mm,
weren't taking part. We did have several districts that were part of deep learning across Canada that said, we really believe this. We're going to keep teaching this way, but we can't afford to pay the fees to be part of the
yeah.
network. So some of them had to drop out. So that barrier has now been removed.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna keep learning about this. I feel like kind of behind. Like, how did I not know all of this was going on? Because it really does envelop so many of the things that we hold dear: social emotional learning, service learning, PBL, like all of that. So, but it puts it into such a good framework. That's the best word. It puts it into such a framework that we all could do it. So this is so enlightening. I love this. How Where do you see deeper learning going in your district in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, our focus will be on AI. So
Okay.
when we look at AI, it needs to fit into our existing framework. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think AI is going to be the next major impact on education. So we need to make sure that it fits within our model in a coherent way. So when we look at others that are working in this area, how's it going to change our learning environment? How do we ensure that there's equity to all of our students? When I look at leveraging technology, I want to make sure that our students are leveraging technology for good.
Yeah.
So that humane use of technology that fits into the model, that's where AI will position itself. AI will bring in new pedagogies from those tools. And our key message that we will be developing for our district is we need to continue to focus on that shared humanity and how we need to look at
Yes.
AI and human capital. So it's not AI replacing human capital, it's humans using AI to make their school a better place, their community a better place, the world a better place. And then it will fit well into the deep learning model. So it's not like we're going to leave deep learning and now transition to AI. It's we will fit AI into all of the elements and make sure that we're not forgetting things like character. So
Right.
if you're developing character, you don't have to worry about kids using AI to cheat because those two are not consistent. So there's ways around making sure students are citing their sources and showing what was if they're using ChatGPT, but there's so many tools. There's over
Right.
10,000 tools that they can choose from. So there's many tools available to our students, but what were the prompts that they use? That's their initial insight. So we're not there yet as a board. I think
Right.
we're behind several districts in the States. It's not really on the radar. It's on everyone's radar because it's happening in our schools, but we have not seen mass policy development, mass implementation. We're taking it slowly, but we will fit it into our deep learning model. We'll come out with policies. We'll fit it into A&E, and we'll embrace it as an innovative board, but we'll embrace it in a way that makes a positive change for our students.
Wow. And when we talk about AI, there's so many districts that close the door on it immediately, right away. There was no foundation that they had to use it and include it, when really they're never going to get away from it. It's already here. It's not going away. So I like how you've set the district, the foundation in your district, where you can take this newer technology and say, how does it fit in our framework? How are we going to use it and fuse it with what we're already doing? And that's such a healthy outlook. Not to be scared, but to be proactive, but to know that you've already got things set in place so that it's not scary. And I applaud all of you for doing that. I have never taught. This is kind of mind blowing for me. So I'm just like, what? I mean, it's so different from what you hear and what you see on, mainstream media. Like, you guys are doing something different. It's really incredible. And I don't know, do you feel that, or do you feel like this is your everyday? Because to me, this is incredible.
Well, it's our everyday. However, I can walk into any classroom in our district and not see deep learning. And I can walk into many, many classrooms where I will see deep learning. So
Hmm.
it's a philosophy and a framework, but it doesn't mean every single day you're seeing the activities I've just mentioned. But if you've got the knowledge of how the framework works, it doesn't matter if you're a first year teacher or someone 30 years in, you can always iterate and improve what you're doing by focusing on one of the elements or all of the elements or any of the competencies. So you've got to balance, what is right at the right time for each individual educator. The other piece that some people forget about is when we look at pedagogies, your pedagogies as a professional educator, you're the expert. That's why you're
Hmm.
there. You have the training, and a typical parent does not have the training. They shouldn't be able to come in and replace you. So you will
Right.
know when direct instruction is the appropriate tool to use. So if I'm always doing inquiry learning and project-based learning, I may be missing the foundation that my student needs. So
Right.
you're not abandoning that. So I think that's important as well. And we know we've had much more success in elementary than we have had in secondary. We're still had
Mm.
success in both with our deep learning framework. But I would say we still have more traditional teaching in secondary than we do elementary. Uh, but we're getting there. Part of it is just the structure of high school that's based
Yeah.
on subjects that it makes it a little bit more difficult. We've got many high school teachers now that are combining multiple subjects that are really
Mm.
doing the deep learning. If they have two blocks, so first period and second period, all of a sudden they have 150 minutes. So the full
Mm.
morning or the full afternoon. And when you've got two subjects with the same group of kids, there's so much you can do with
It's
thematic
true.
teaching, with deep learning, field trips, experiential, visiting other classes. So it's not something that we'll say that we've reached it. It's something that we'll keep working towards. But yeah, I'm very proud of our district and the work all of our staff do. At the same time, we know it's been a hard couple of years. So
Yeah.
we did. It's not that we stopped deep learning during COVID and during those 2 to 3 years, but we didn't progress as quickly as we had been.
Yeah.
So this year we're starting to progress again because a lot of those barriers were removed. And one of the ironies of our challenge during COVID was we had worked so hard for so many years to get rid of the desks in elementary, and all of a sudden you needed to separate kids. And we had built years and years of building up. We want kids working collaboratively in groups of 3 or 4.
Mm.
So that was an unforeseen situation, but we're rectifying that now. We're in a good spot. And
Good.
I mean, I think I'll finish just in terms of the big picture. It's
Hmm.
not an initiative. So if someone
Okay.
starts to say they're doing you're a deep learning teacher and I'm not a deep learning teacher, that's early years. You may start with that if you only have a few schools to build capacity, but it really is about everyone in the district understanding that this is our teaching and our learning framework. It's our way of being. So it's not an initiative that you do during slow times. You do it at the end of the year. You always have that thought process of what can I do with the deep learning model to support the different learners in my class. So when you're focusing on equity and I have some racialized students that I really need to find ways of connecting with, well, who are my learning partnerships? As a white male, my learning partnerships might be a Hispanic female. It could be a black PhD student from Ottawa U that's going to come in. My students need to see themselves in the work that they're doing in our schools. So the deep learning model fits perfectly because I look at the learning environment. I can leverage technology if I don't have that representation in the classroom. And now you'll see those students' eyes light up. They see themselves. And that's,
Yeah.
again, going back to where we started.
Right.
Let's make it engaging for our students, and then the student achievement will naturally result. And that's what we're seeing.
I love that. Man, Tom, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been so enlightening and just exciting for me, especially because, we're in different places in the world, but to hear what you guys are doing makes a difference for me and what I go into my classroom and do. So thank you again, just for sharing all of this. How can our listeners find you? I am going to include your Twitter, and I'm following you on Twitter now. Is that where you would like people to follow you?
Yeah, I know that's something I need to expand beyond Twitter, but that is in our district because we've been using Twitter for so long. I have not migrated to Instagram. I'm not on TikTok, so the best spot is TD at TD Ottawa. So that's my Twitter profile, Tom D'Amico Ottawa. That's the best spot. I can also be reached by email, thomas.d'amico at ocsb.ca. That's Ottawa Catholic School Board. But any direct message on Twitter, I'll always follow up with an email and we can connect that way. And if anyone's in Ottawa, anyone that calls us would like to visit classrooms, we always bring people in. It's not a show and tell. It's here's who we are, here's what we're
Yeah.
doing, and we engage with any visitor that would like to see our classes.
Wow. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. Thank you to anybody who is listening. And for everybody who is doing this important work, we really thank you for doing it every day. And we will see you again next time. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Melody. My pleasure.